everybody, welcome back to another Beans Bag and Handicraft Co. tutorial. Today we are making the Monica carry-all bag by Oro Rosa Designs. This bag, I have never seen a bag, it's a very large bag as you can see. I've never seen anything quite like it. It's an amazing sew. I would say it's about an intermediate sew. Yeah, let me show you some of the features of this bag. So you can kind of see it has this decorative panel on the outside, and it almost makes it look like it's a bag in a bag, and in a way it is. On the top here, we have two hidden pockets on this side, and when you open it up, it opens up so big and wide. So you got slip pockets on one side and a zipper pocket on the other. Yeah, I have no words. This is just such an amazing bag to sew up. Interfacing wise, what you're going to need, it calls for Peltex. You must use Peltex. The Decovil Heavy will not do the job for this one, trust me. So Peltex, there's Decovil Lite in here. A medium woven interfacing, I'm using SF101. If you're looking to find a source for all three of those items, I do sell them on my website, which I have linked below. My vinyl was from Fabricland. This one is just a marine vinyl. This one was an upholstery vinyl. It's kind of got a snaky print to it. My lining was a Quiltland cotton from Fabricland as well that I had in my stash that I used. All of my hardware except for my zipper and zipper pull are from Emmeline bags. My zipper pulls, the zipper pull was from My Handmade Space. Yeah, I just love this bag. I can't wait to make another. So let's hop to it and let's start making this bag. All right, so hardware we are going to need for this. You are going to need your handmade or your logo tag. I always have some Decovil Heavy scraps for backing my rivets. 2 number 5 zipper pulls and number 5 zipper tape. 4 strap ends. I am going to install 6 purse feet on this bag. A zipper end. And if you're making a tassel, I have this tassel. All this hardware is from Emmeline bags. Okay, so what to cut? I have cut a tassel piece, 2 pieces for my handles, 2 main panels, a bottom panel, an interior main panel, my body exterior, that's my bag body exterior, 2 side panels, 2 main lining pieces backed with SF101 medium woven interfacing, your slip pocket also backed with SF101, and your 2 zipper pockets also backed with SF101. Here is my zipper overlay. You're going to need 2 side panel stabilizers with Decovil Lite, 2 bag body stabilizers of Decovil Lite, bottom stabilizer of Peltex, and 2 exterior main stabilizers of Peltex. Okay, now how we are going to put this onto our side panels, our Decovil Lite. So what you want to do is measure down from the top center of the curve 1/2 inch and just make a mark. And also measure in 1/2 inch from each side and draw a line. And this is going to help us with the placement of that Decovil Lite. Just going to double check to make sure this is a 1/2 inch here. And it is. I'm just going to extend that line a little bit. Okay, then take your stabilizer or your Decovil Lite piece and put it in between those lines, and then take that over to the iron and fuse that on, nice and centered. And go ahead and do the same with the other side panel. Okay, now you're going to take your bag body exterior. I'll do one side with you. You can do the other off camera. So you're going to measure in, oops, I just got to cut this a little more even here. 1/2 inch in from the short side. And then you're going to measure up 7/8 of an inch on both long sides. And the other side as well. And this really helps for getting that Decovil Lite centered nicely on this bag. Okay, and then take your piece of Decovil Lite for this, and it should fit in between those lines perfectly. And then you're going to fuse that on with your iron. And then go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side of this piece with the other side of Decovil. Okay, now for our bottom. So we are using Peltex. You must use Peltex for the bottom and the main panels of this bag. Decovil Heavy does not quite do the job for this one. Okay, so you are going to measure in 2 3/8 of an inch from each short end of the bottom piece and make a line. And again on the other short side, 2 3/8. Okay, and then you're going to measure up 1/2 inch from each long side and draw a line. And the other side. And then you're going to take your Peltex stabilizer piece, and that should fit perfectly into those lines, which it does. And then you can take some double-sided tape and apply it onto the back of your Peltex. Mine is fusible. I'm actually going to fuse it as well. I just want to show you how you would do it if you only had the sew-in Peltex. This is how you would do it. And then stick that stabilizer piece down in between those lines. Just like so. Again, I'm going to take this to the iron, and I'm just going to give it a quick press to fuse it because I do have fusible Peltex. Okay, now for the purse seat. The pattern only calls for 5. I'm going to actually do 6. So from the Peltex piece, you want to measure 2 inches in from the Peltex piece and 1 1/4 inches down from where the Peltex piece is. And then put a little dot there. And this is to give us the placement for our purse feet. Do the same on the other side. So 2 inches in on the Peltex piece and 1 1/4 inches up from the edge of the Peltex piece. Measure in 7 1/8 of an inch to get to the center. Now, I am actually, rather than just doing 1 here, I'm going to do 2. You're going to see I mark the wrong place here because I measured it from the end of the vinyl. We'll go back in a second and fix that up. And then again from the short side, 2 inches in and 1 1/4 down. From the Peltex piece, not from the edge of the vinyl. as I have discovered I have done with my centerpieces here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that up. So let's get those other ones centered. And if you're doing 5, you would just put the 5th one in the middle of those 2 middle dots. Okay, so go ahead and install your purse feet as per the manufacturer's instructions, and this is what it looks like. Now, if you don't know how to do this, I do have a class. I will link it below to show how to install purse feet. So next, what we want to do is we want to take our main panel, lay it right side up on our table, take our bottom panel and lay it right sides together with the main panel, and clip along that long edge. As you can also see, I have put some duct tape or Gorilla Tape on the backside of my purse feet, and this is just to make sure the prongs stay in place and that it won't rub on the lining pieces later on. And you're going to sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that is done. So now what you want to do is lay with the bottom panel wrong side up, and we are just going to trim the seam of just the bottom panel to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is just to reduce some of the bulk here. Make sure you are not cutting the main panel, just the seam of that bottom panel. My arms almost aren't long enough to reach across the table for this one. Just like that. And then what you want to do is we want to fold the seam towards the bottom panel. Give it a good finger press here. Make sure it's going towards the bottom panel, and then do a 1/8 of an inch top stitch right along there. And then off camera, I'm going to go ahead and attach the other main panel on the other side the exact same way. Okay, so we are now on to step 6. You can put this panel step 6. Okay, on the wrong side of your interior main panel, we are going to do some markings. Ignore markings I have there. I did this once and I did it wrong, so we are doing it again properly. So you want to measure 1.5 inches in from one of the long edges and in from one of the short edges. So you're going to have a start-stop line here. So first from the short edge, I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. And then do the same on the other side, 1.5 inches in and make a mark. And then along the long edges, we want to do 1.5 inches up, starting and stopping at those lines that we just did off of the short sides. And do the same on the other side. The thing I did wrong the first time was I drew the line all the way to the end, which wasn't totally wrong. It's just we're supposed to be stopping at 1.5 mark. Just like that. And then what we want to do is we want to clip our centers. You can mark or you can clip. I prefer to do little scissor clips. And that should be approximately 12 inches in. So I'm just going to take my ruler and double check that my cutting was good and that my piece actually measures correctly. So I'm just going to take my 12-inch ruler here, and then we will, and it's 12 inches. So we are good. So what we want to do is from that center line, we want to draw a line straight down the middle. And then next, what we're going to do from that center line that we just drew to the right of it, we're going to do a 2-inch line, 2 inches away from that center line. And do the same on to the left of the line, another 2-inch line. And then from that center line, we're going to do that again, but we're going to do it at 3 inches on both sides. There is lots of marking in this bag, but it's well worth it, I promise you. So you should have something that looks like this. Okay, now you're going to flip this so it's wrong sides down. We still have our center clip marks here, so I'm just going to take my chalk and draw down that center line just so I have a guide. I use chalk just because I can wash it away. Again, I'm just checking to make sure that I'm 12 inches from that line. I'm perfectly centered. We do want this to be as accurate as it possibly can, knowing that center. Okay, and then what we're going to do is 1.5 inches to the right of that center line. I'm going to take a 7.5 inch piece of double-sided tape, and I am going to center it right along my ruler there. Not quite centered. I'm just working to find that center. The other side will be a little easier because I will have already found that center. This does not have to be 100% perfect, just a rough. Okay, and then we are going to do the exact same to the left of that center line. And lay down your other piece of double-sided tape. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to take our bag body exterior and put it right side up on our workspace. And then we're going to take the panel we were just working on, put it wrong sides down, and we want to measure where we are going to stick this down. So we want it to be 1.25 inch up from the bottom. I'm going to use 2 rulers to do this. So 1.25 inch up from the bottom. And take your time with these measurements, and 3/4 inch in from the side. And where those meet up, that's where this panel is going to line up, hopefully. So I'm just checking, you can't see it because it's off camera. I'm just checking my other side to make sure it's 3/4 of an, oh, here we go. That it's 3/4 of an inch, which it is. Just to make sure I cut my pieces right. Okay, then I'm going to flip it up and I'm going to remove my double-sided tape. And lay it back down and stick it into place. Make sure it's nice and smooth. Again, I'm just double checking to make sure I'm nice and centered here. And that my measurements are good. Adjust accordingly if you need to. Sometimes you don't get it on straight the first time, but you do want it to be the same all the way across. Just like this. Just make sure that double-sided tape is stuck down really good. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this isn't in the pattern, but I'm going to just take some painter's tape just to hold this panel in place because we are going to be taking it to the machine and I don't want it to shift. So this is just a little bit of extra insurance that it's not going to move and all will be well. And painter's tape isn't overly sticky. It won't leave a residue, so it's the perfect option. So I'm just doing that on all 4 edges of the interior main panel. And then what I'm going to do is the center rectangle, I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch it. So I have it all stitched here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that rectangle out, but I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch of a seam allowance from my stitch line to where I'm cutting. So I'm just taking my rotary cutter. I'm not going right to the stitching of the line. I'm just going part way. I will finish up the rest with my scissors. So on all 4 corners, and then I'm going to go in with my scissors and make them nice and crisp to completely detach it. Just like this. Okay, so now we are going to do our hidden pockets here. So we're going to backstitch, go and follow these lines all the way around, backstitching at the top and bottom of both sides. So backstitch, go down, across and up, and backstitch again. So that is all done. Now we can remove the painter's tape. We have stitching in there that's going to hold everything in place, and we are good to go. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to take our ruler on each of the corners of our interior panel here. We are going to put a 3/8 of an inch square. So just measure in 3/8 from the side and 3/8 from the bottom. And this is going to help us when we go to do our mitered corners here shortly. So mark it on all 4 corners of that interior main panel. just like so. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our exterior main panel and we are going to find all 4 centers on all 4 sides. So as you know, I like to use scissor clips, so I'm just going to do that, find my center on the bottom panel there. And also along the other sides. And the other side. You can also use a pen if you wanted to do it that way. I like the clips because the clips never go away. Just make sure if you're using snips like I am that you are keeping them within the seam allowance. Okay, then you're going to take, and we've already got the centers marked on our interior main panels. We just need to do it on this exterior piece. Again, we probably could have went ahead and did all these centers before we attached the pieces together, but as long as they're done, they're done. That way we know our bag is going to be nice and centered. Okay, so we are on to step 28. So we want to take our bag body exterior and put it right size together with our main exterior. And this is really a different way of putting a bag together. So you're going to take the center mark that we made on the interior main panel, kind of push the bag body exterior panel out of the way, and we are going to match up our center marks with the center marks of our main panel. So I'm going to go ahead and I am marking the 4 centers first. Make sure you are pushing that the bag body exterior raw edges kind of up and under. So I'm going to go ahead and do the 2 long edges. So those are all clipped together. Now we are going to do the same on the short edges. So grab the interior main panel center and the center of the main panel exterior and match up those centers. It's really an ingenious way of doing this. I have never ever done a bag like this before, so it just blows my mind how Alexis's brain thinks. It's awesome. So we are really only clipping to those 3/8 squares that we did, because we're only going to sew in between those squares. Again, use lots of clips just to make sure everything stays in place. Okay, and go ahead and do that with the other side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of put this onto our machine like this, and from starting and stopping at the little boxes we made, we are going to do a 3/8 of an inch stitch with a 3/8, stopping at those corners. So 3/8 of an inch this way, break your thread, 3/8 of an inch this way, back stitch all the way down to the next box, back stitch, and then start again down that long side. Okay, so this is what it looks like when we have done that. Now we have to deal with these corners. This is how we are going to make our mitered corners for the exterior of the bag. So go ahead and line up the raw edges of the unsewn parts of the corners. And you're going to want to do that on all 4 of them. Okay, so this is the tricky part. So I discovered it is a lot easier to do this without the clips in the bag. You'll see me struggle with that a little bit. So you're going to need a ruler that has the 45-degree line. You're going to line that 45-degree line of the ruler up with the unfolded edge of the corner we have done. So yes, definitely, if you can just hold this in place with your hands before attempting to measure in there, it helps, because you can't get the ruler to lay flat. So you see me learning that here. So again, you're going to line that 45-degree mark up with the raw edges. There we go. Clips are right out. Just ensure that it's evenly set together. Okay, so the ruler line that 45-degree line up with that raw edge on that angle, and you want to butt it right up to where we stopped our stitching at the 3/8 mark, and draw a line down. So it should be attached to our stitching line there. And we want to ensure that this is a perpendicular, I think that's the right word, perpendicular angle. So we are going to take our ruler here in a moment, and we are going to just create a little box here just to make sure that we have that 90-degree angle on the folded edge compared to that line that we just drew. And if we have a perfect little square there, we are golden, which I do. So let's try it again on the other side here. So do that on all three. And here we go. And you can see how my line goes right up to where our stitch line ended and all the way down. So we're going to go and sew that on all 4 corners. So I thought I'd just bring you to the machine to show you what I did. So I put my needle down right where the stitches stopped from when we did the long edge. So we know there won't be any openings in that corner. Sorry for the shaking camera here, guys. Backstitch. And so all the way down to the edge and backstitch. Do that with all the other 3 corners. Okay, so now what we're going to do, this is kind of like boxing corners. We are going to cut off the excess, and we want to make sure we leave about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here. So the little box that we drew that was a 3/8 of an inch box, just kind of use that as your guide for where you're cutting. Do that on all 4 corners, making sure you are only cutting the excess off that corner. You don't want your bag folded under there and accidentally cutting it, because that would be just not good. So just manipulate the bag a little bit so you get that part to lay flat, so you're ensuring that you're only cutting off the excess of those corners. Okay, so we have that done, but now we're going to have to do a little bit of work so we can get that to lay flat. So what you're going to want to do is we're going to measure in these corners at a 45-degree angle and draw a little line, as well as matching a line with the seam that we did on the long side. And that's going to give us a line where we can cut the excess off these corners from the seam allowance there. So it's kind of like cutting this little triangle part out that's sticking up. I don't know if you can see that there. So yeah, just trimming away the little bit of excess. The instructions probably explain it a lot better than I do, but yeah, so you're pretty much using your ruler to line the edge with your sewn seam and draw a line continuing that stitch direction. And then you're going to repeat with the 45-degree seam you stitched, kind of following that one, and it's going to kind of make a really extended angle. and then you'll cut that with leaving about a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you can see me measuring those lines here. And then going in with my scissors and carefully trimming it without cutting that seam allowance or into the stitches of the seam allowance there. Very small snips. Double check that you didn't cut into your stitches, and then you're going to do that with the other ones. Now we are going to go in on these little corners at the bottom. We're just going to trim those to an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on a little bit of an angle. And that's just going to help us be able to lay the seam flat, and it's going to give us a nice pointed miter corner there. Be very careful not to cut into your seam allowance. Or not your seam allowance, your stitching. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just take some double-sided tape, and because we trimmed the top and bottom of these corners, that's going to allow our seams to lie flat. So use a little bit of double-sided tape on the back side of each seam, and then we are going to lay them flat. It's important that we have all these seam allowances on the corners open. Just like so. Do that on the other 3 corners. Okay, now that that's done, now this, you can see how these are laying nice and flat, but now we want this middle seam to be laying flat as well. So I am going to take my double-sided tape. Double-sided tape is your friend here. And I'm going to put it just on the inside of that seam allowance there, where we joined the interior main panel and the exterior main panel together. Remove the paper backing and then just finger press it nice and flat. Just like that. And then you're going to go and do that on the other 3 sides. Okay, I don't trust my double-sided tape, so I am also going to take my duct tape and I'm going to put it over top of those seams because I don't want them to pop up when we turn it. Just make sure you keep that duct tape out of where we will be doing some top stitching, which is around about 1/8 of an inch around the exterior. So if you keep it out of there, you will be fine. So I'm just putting it on to help make sure that that seam is not going to lift. You can skip this step. You don't have to do this. I just am scared that my double-sided tape is not going to hold up when I turn. Okay, so that's done, and now it's time to turn. So we're going to turn through that hole we cut in the bottom of the bag. And while you do that, you want to be pushing out the corners, and you are going to see how beautiful those miter corners turned out here. They're going to be nice and pointy and sharp, and it is going to frame our hidden interior pockets beautifully. So push out all of your seams, all of your corners. Look how beautiful and sharp that corner is. That's exactly what we want. Now you can see my Decovil Lite here lifted a little bit with the turning. I'm going to take that to my iron off camera and carefully press that back down. It just means I didn't fuse my Decovil Lite fully. Push all the air out of it. And I'm going to take my purple, actually you can see here, here's where the hidden pocket is. And you can see how we have the bag lining exterior all sticking out there, getting ready to be able to sew the next step that we will be doing. So I'm going to take my purple thing. You can take a chopstick, you can take a pen, whatever it is you use, just to point out those corners so they're nice and sharp. Just like so. And you can see how beautiful those miter corners turned out. Okay, now we are on to the side panels. So what you want to do is take your two side panels and you want to find the centers on the top and on the bottom. Okay, and then you are going to find the centers close to your turning hole here, and you are going to clip matching that center. And then you're going to bring it up the side. Again, you're doing, this is with the inside panel. And so you kind of pull that exterior piece out of the way. It's floppy inside, and that's exactly what we want. It makes it easy to manage for what we need to do. They will be solid closer to the end of this as we put in our stabilizer, but this is why we don't put the stabilizer in right away. So match those ends up, making sure you're not clipping in your main exterior panels there. So you're putting the side panels to the bag body exterior is what you're doing here. Now evenly distribute the fabric around the curve. Now for these curves, I know it's suggested in the pattern that where it's curving here, you could actually put staples in to hold it in place. I don't like to do that because I don't like to pull out staples. I always have a fear that I'm going to leave them in. So I'm just going to risk it, and I'm going to just clip it. You could also base these in place by hand sewing them if you wanted to, but it's not too big of a curve, so I think I will be okay. So I am just going to take my chances and do it this way and make sure I go carefully when I do sew it around that curve to make sure nothing shifts out of place. Don't be afraid to use lots of clips on this part to hold everything into place. And I'm happy to say that it fit in there perfectly, no excess fabric, everything's going in nice and smooth, so that's always a good sign that cutting was accurate. Okay, and then I'm going to take this to my machine and put it down like this, and I'm going to sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side with the other side panel. Okay, so this is all done on both sides. And you can see how the interior just kind of squished, or the exterior is just squished inside there. So I am going to mark 1 inch from each of the tops because we are going to trim our seam allowances, but we do not want to go past that 1 inch spot there. So I'm just putting little marks there as a reminder for myself. And then I'm going to trim my seam allowance past that 1 inch mark down to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with my pinking shears, so I get nice perfect curve to the bag there. If you don't have pinking shears, you can always just do snips around the corners and then use your scissors to cut up the sides. So again, being careful not to trim past that 1 inch mark that we just did. Keep that seam allowance full. And down the other side. Just like that. So go ahead and do that with the other side. Okay, so that is all done, and now we are going to flip the bag right side out. And it is going to give us the soft shell of the exterior of the bag. Make sure you poke out the curves along those seams that we just did, so we got a nice rounded side panel. I'm just using my finger to do this. And we can see how our bag is starting to take shape. So you got your pockets here. I've got a few loose threads here, so I'm just cutting them off, and here's your other hidden pocket here. Okay, so that's what we are looking like so far. So we're going to put the exterior to the side, and we're going to start working on our lining. So you want to take out your slip pocket piece, and you're going to fold it right sides together. And clip down the sides, the open sides. And then part way down the long side. And what we're going to do here is, because we are going to leave an opening for turning the slip pocket around, I am just going to make some reminder marks for a turning hole. It's about 3 or 4 inches or so. And then I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew along here with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at those marks, leaving that open. So here we go, we got an opening in the bottom. I am going to diagonally clip my corners so I get nice, crisp, sharp corners. Being careful not to cut through the stitches that we just made. And I'm also going to trim it down to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I am not going to do it along that bottom edge because we are going to be turning that under to close it off. So clip your corner, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance up this side, and then we are going to turn it through. Poking out your corners so they're nice and sharp and crisp. Okay, and then where this opening is, we're going to kind of turn the raw edges in, and we are going to take this to the iron and give it a good press. Just make sure those are nice and in for about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have that pressed. You can see how the raw edges are pressed in. Now I'm going to take this to the machine, and along the folded side, I am going to do a 1/8 of an inch top stitch. So we have that all top stitched. So now what we want to do is take one of our lining panels, fold it in half to find our centers, do small clips to mark those centers, or mark it with your marking pen, whichever you prefer. And then we are going to measure 3.5 inches up from the bottom of our lining panel. And this is going to be the placement of our slip pocket. So what I do is I fold my slip pocket in half, make sure the open end is facing down, fold the slip pocket in half, and put that fold right along the middle mark of the lining panel there, and then open it up along that ruler, and you should be almost perfectly centered. And then I'm just going to take some pins and pin it into place here. Usually about 4 pins or so is good enough. Like so. Just one more in this other corner here. And I'm going to do my pockets just a little bit different. I don't need a little pen pocket in mine, so I'm just going to make this into 2 slip pockets. So I'm going to take my chalk and I'm just going to mark a center line down that slip pocket using my center clips as a guide. And then what I'm going to do is do top stitch down the side, across the bottom, up the center chalk line there, and then I'm going to come back down that same line for extra stability, across the bottom and up the other side. And what that's going to do is also close up that bottom that was open. And here we are, we have it open, and we have a successful 2 pockets and a closed up seam at the bottom. So I'm going to add some decorative rivets here. That's just something that I like to do. And I've done that. If you decide to do it, make sure you back them with a little bit of Decovil Heavy. This part is not in the pattern. Okay, now you're going to take your other lining panel, and this is where you're going to take your zipper pocket and install it. I am not going to put this in the tutorial. I am doing it different than in the pattern. I am using, I have a class on it. It's a zipper overlay pocket for easy bag turning. I will link it down below. If you want to learn how to do it my way, you can that way. Okay, so I'm done my pocket. I have the open on the back, which we want. You're going to put the 2 lining panels right sides together, and you are going to clip the sides. We are leaving the bottom open. And the other side. And then what we're going to do is we are going to start with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the top, and about halfway through work out to a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. And what that's going to do is just make it so the lining is not too baggy. Okay, so now we are on to the zipper. We're in the home stretch, guys. Okay, so what I like to do is just take my chalk marker and about an inch in on one side of the wrong side of my zipper. I like to just make a 1-inch mark there, and you will see why later. So now what we need to do is we need to turn the zipper end in by 90 degrees. So you kind of fold it in upon itself. I'm going to hand baste this together so it stays in place. I am a terrible hand sewer, but here we go. This part is just really easy to hand baste just because it's easy to hold in place to get that perfect angle. You can take it to your machine and use a stiletto to hold it as well, but this is just as fast. Just a couple long stitches will do the trick. And then just knot that off so it stays in place. Okay, then go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side of the zipper and hand baste that side in place. Okay, so now take your zipper and pull the two pieces apart. So what we're going to want to do is this exterior part of the bag, we want to fold it out of the way because we're working with this interior main panel again. So you want to match up the two side seams. I'm just going to put a clip there to hold it in place. So just line up where the side seams were. And then an inch in from the end, that's hard to say. I'm just going to put my ruler there for 1 inch and do some very tiny snips at that 1 inch mark. You can also use a marking pen for this. I just use the snips so they don't go away and I know where they are. And you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Match up those side seams to find the center of that side panel. And snip in just like like 1/8 of an inch of a snip on both sides there. And what those marks are going to be where we start our zippers and where we veer our zipper tails down. So you can see my little teeny tiny snips there. They're not very big. Okay, so I am just going to even up my zipper here. Just cut that extra little tail off. And we are going to put the zipper tape right sides together at one of those 1 inch mark snips is where we're going to start it. So the zipper and the exterior, that, you know, this part of the bag are right sides together. And then you're going to clip it all the way across. Trying not to stretch your zipper tape if you can. We don't want to have a wavy zipper. All the way to that other 1 inch snip that we did on the other side. If you can, try to clip your seams open here. I forgot to do that with some of them. If you're on a domestic, it may be hard to get over those if you've used vinyl. So try to open up those side seams if you can. I think I did on half of them. When you get to that 1 inch mark on the tail side of it, you want to veer the tail down. So we will be sewing off of the tape and the tail will be going down, and that's to ensure that that tail doesn't get caught in that seam. So we'll be able to put our zipper pulls on at a later time. Just like so, you can see how it goes down. Then you're going to baste that on with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and do the exact same thing with the other side. So I have them both clipped on here. I just want to make sure that you have your zipper tails on the same side and where your zipper begins on the same side. So this is all basted on now, all the way around. And I just put it down on my machine like this and held that exterior and did it that way. And I did have my zipper fit on my machine as well. I have lots of fraying fabric here apparently. Okay, so now you're going to take your lining and you are going to put the lining and the outside of the bag right sides together. Now the bottom of the lining is open. That is what we want. Okay, so you're going to take this exterior part of the bag and you're going to fold it down so we can work with that zipper panel where we were working on. We do not want that to get caught in the zipper at all. So you want to make sure it's folded right down, as well as you want to make sure that the zipper tails are down and out of the way as well. You don't want the ends of those getting caught in the seam. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find the middles that we clipped there and the middle that we clipped on our liners, and we are going to clip them together. Then go to the other side, same thing, look for the centers that we had marked and match them up, making sure that that exterior is folded down. And then you're going to mark the center seam of the lining to the center that we had clipped earlier on the side panel. Just like so. And then evenly distribute the fabric in between all of our center marks. I noticed here I'm a little bit uneven and jagged here, so I'm just evening up my lining panel here so I won't have any holes in the bag. Again, don't be a stranger to clips. You want the zipper to stay intact. So again, on the other side panel, you match up the center seam of the lining panel and the center that we marked on the side panel. And then from center mark to center mark, evenly distribute that fabric and do that all the way around. Okay, so I have it all clipped and ready to go. So how I'm going to sew this at my machine is I'm going to do it from the inside of the bag at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with my zipper foot on. All the way around, just turning the bag as you go, making sure your needle down whenever you have to adjust. So this is it. So the moment of truth is we are going to pull it through the bottom. We're going to see how straight we sewed our zipper, make sure we didn't catch it into the seam at all. So kind of pull your lining out. I think I'm looking pretty good. It looks pretty even all the way across, so I am happy with that. Then push your lining in, and then what we're going to do is roll that seam in between your fingers. And I like to use these giant Wonder clips to kind of hold the seam in place. So go around the whole perimeter of the bag there, rolling the lining fabric away from the zipper and the exterior down so we can get a really nice top stitch there. When you come to the zipper tails, make sure you do not sew them down. You'll want them up and above, so they don't get caught in that top stitch. We don't need to stitch the zipper tails. Otherwise, we will not be able to get our pull on. And as I'm going around, I'm just double checking that my zipper was sewn easily, that nothing, or evenly, that no part was missed and there's any holes or any raw edges showing. I didn't have any. It all worked out perfectly, which is more than you can ask for when you're doing a top zipper. Almost there. Okay, so now I'm going to put this down on my machine like this. And I am going to top stitch along there with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we'll come back. Okay, so that top stitching is all done all the way around. I've already gone and installed my Peltex into one side, and I'll show you how to do it with the other side. I found that I had to cut off about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, or 1/8 of an inch off of the side of the Peltex in order to make it fit. And then you need to gently kind of roll it in, and we're going to find the opening of the exterior of the bag, go past the lining and into that hole that we had cut in the very beginning. And we are going to stuff the Peltex in like that. So gently roll it so it doesn't get too creased. Stick it in through that opening. And then up in there. Now, you're kind of going blind with this. It's really hard to show what I'm doing here, but I'm just trying to maneuver that Peltex to go flat in there, right up to the corners of the bag. You want it to be flush with the inside seams there, because this is what is going to give our bag the structure and the stiffness we want for that outer panel. So you kind of feel with it, you kind of maneuver it, you manipulate it, and get it into place where you need it to go. What I like to do is grab the corners, and then I kind of pulled the corners of the Peltex right up into the corners and grabbed them for that first one, and then it was really easy to get them in the other way. So I just kind of clipped it here and then worked on the other corner and went all the way around and clipped it as I had it. So this is what it looks like here. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to top stitch this. Now I'm going to top stitch this from the inside because that's going to be easiest. So make sure that your bobbin stitches look really nice, because that's what's going to show on the outside of the bag. So I'm going to go to my machine and I am going to do that, starting and stopping at the bottom panel. So here we go. My top stitching turned out really good. I did my back stitch on the bottom so it's not as noticeable, and that is complete. I also reached in through the bottom and put in my nameplate. And now we're ready to close up the lining of the bag. So just like any of the other tutorials that I usually do, we're going to pull out that pocket. This one's a little bit different because we have the box corners, but you're going to pull out the lining where the opening is through the pocket. And you're going to match up the raw edges of the straight edge. We're going to leave the corners alone for now, the boxed corners. We're just working on that straight edge currently. So clip that straight edge all the way across. And then we'll take this to the machine and stitch it with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, because we had a bigger seam allowance for the bottom of our lining, so it's not as droopy once finished on the inside of the bag. So go ahead and give that a sew, leaving these corners open. So that's done. So now we're going to box our corners. So you're going to take the two seams, you're going to pull them together, open up the seams flat, and clip our corners. like so, and stitch that with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and do the exact same thing with the other corner, and then you can stuff your lining in and close up your pocket. Okay, so we've done that. We've closed up the pocket. We're good to go. Now we are going to work on the straps. So what I've already done one strap. What we want to do is from each end of the strap, we want to mark in centered 1.5 inches and place a mark for our rivet. And then 2.5 inches and place another rivet mark. Do the same on the other side. 1.5 inches in. And 2.5 inches in. And then take your hole punch and punch out those marks. You want to make sure these are very accurate because we're going to be doing the same markings on the exterior of the bag because we need these holes to match up. Okay, so now you're going to take the exterior of the bag. You're going to go 3 inches in from the side and 1.5 inches down. Again, you want to make sure that these are very accurate because they have to line up with the holes that we did on our straps because we're going to be connecting them here. Like as you can see here, I'm obviously measuring incorrectly. I'm going to catch my error here in a moment, as this should be 2.5 inches from the top. So take time to make sure you've got it nice and straight and accurate. So 1.5 inches and then 2.5 inches. Like so. And then you're going to do the same on the opposite side. And you will be doing the exact same on the other side of the bag. Now for these, for that second hole, it's recommended to use large rivets, which have a longer post. I unfortunately did not have any. I managed to do this with medium rivets, but I definitely recommend using the large rivets for the second hole as the pattern says. So the first rivet is just going to go through the exterior, and that's where the medium rivet is good to go. Straight through there, and then the second rivet you're going to punch through the lining and the it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. So yeah, that's where the large rivet would be a lot easier. I was lucky because the medium rivets posts could go through, so I could put the cap on and it did solidify it good, but a large rivet would have been a lot easier for me here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our rivets. Again, the first hole is a medium rivet, the second hole is a large rivet. So we're going to go ahead and put our rivet through our strap and then through our first hole there, which is just going through the exterior, not through the lining. My hole punch is a little bit dull. I think I need a new one, so I'm just kind of repunching it to get it to kind of go through. And put your cap on the back. And then you're going to grab a large rivet and put it through the second hole. And that's going to go through all of the layers straight through to the lining. So you can see I'm struggling a little bit with this. I said my hole punch is dull, so I'm going to take my awl and just kind of poke the holes through to make them a little bit larger for me. I also could have used my hole punch on my rivet press, but I obviously was not thinking about that at the time. And then through the next layers into the lining. And put on your cap. And then you're going to take this to your rivet press as soon as I can get it through my lining, because it didn't cut through my lining. There we go. And press these with the rivet press on all sides with both straps. Okay, so this is done. I also added a D-ring in between the two rivets because I wanted a place to attach a tassel. So that's just an easy way to be able to do that. So you can see how the rivet goes all the way through to the lining, and then the first one just through that first layer. Now all we have left to do is to install that zipper pull, and this is where my handy dandy fork and those chalk lines I made are going to come in handy. So to know if you got your zipper pull on straight, you want those chalk lines that we've made on the back to line up. So it does usually take me a couple goes to get it to perfectly line up. So I put it into my fancy fork here. And you can see my lines don't quite match up, so I'm going to redo it and keep redoing it until they match up, so I know I have a straight zipper. And there you go. You can see my line is straight, so my zipper is going to be straight, which is awesome. So you can zip it up. I cut my zipper extra long, so I'm just going to trim up my tail here. And then I'm going to go ahead and install my zipper end, and we're good to go. All right, guys, we are complete. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I have to thank Alexis again for allowing me to do videos on her patterns, her amazing, amazing patterns. Yeah, it's just, I can't wait to see everybody's sews with these. It's going to be amazing. I am part of the Oro Rosa YouTube team, so I have also included down in the description the links to the channels for the other 3 YouTubers that do videos for Oro Rosa. We have Lauren Mormino of So Whatever. We have Monica, and we have Chanova. So make sure you check out their channels before, and if you haven't already, give them a like and a subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to me yet, please do me a solid and subscribe. Leave comments down below. If you have any questions, feel free to inbox me on my Facebook business page or shoot me an email. Again, everything is down in the description there. Anyways, have a great one, guys. I will see you on the next one.